92.7 Nooga Radio.
Good people. I know some haters out there were like, oh, Marie Mott's not on the radio, but I am. Had a little bit of technical difficulties. You know what it is. Know Your Rights Fridays. And y'all know what it is. I'm taking it from the streets to City Hall, from City Hall to the mayor's office. Can't leave out the police department, from the valley low to the mountaintop, giving you guys a bird's eye view to what's going on in the city of Chattanooga. Oh, I know some haters out there were like, oh my God, Marie's not on the radio. We won. Oh, I'm so sorry to disappoint, but I'm here. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm here. And I'm here with Know Your Rights Friday. That's right. Know Your Rights Friday. It is now and forevermore where we talk about constitutional law, your rights, how I can help you not only know what your rights are, but encourage you, the listener, to assert your rights, to assert them. And today, what we're going to be talking about, and it happens to just be off of the heels of what happened in California when we're looking at cash bail. We're talking about the Eighth Amendment today. That's right. We're going to be going through the Bill of Rights first, and then we're going to expand beyond the Bill of Rights, because the Bill of Rights has a lot of the immediate laws that we need to know from the Constitution that have the ability to help us in our everyday life, right? So y'all know what it is. Marie Mott, I'm streaming live on Facebook. I'm on air, Nooga Radio 92.7, as well as, that's right, I'm on YouTube. If you can't call in, and the call-in number is 800-8949, always the same. If you want to call in and chop it up with me, please do that. But if you can't, you're at work, you're on break, and you're just watching, drop a comment, wave at me, say something, let me know that you're listening, you're tuning in, and don't forget to share. Share, because this information is not just valuable to whoever is listening right now, to you who is listening. It's also valuable to your children, your grandchildren, everyone in your family, your church members. We have to understand what our rights are so we know how to protect ourselves and to ensure that whenever we're moving about in this republic, because we do not live in a democracy, which is a mob rule. We live in a republic, which is an individual freedom type situation. When we move about in this republic, we move about and our rights are not infringed upon. And so why is it important that I wanted to cover the Eighth Amendment today? Well, coming off of the hills, and I don't really like talking about what's going on outside of Chattanooga, but with this being something that's kind of big, not only did I want to talk about it, but I also wanted to contextualize the end of the cash bail system in California, because a lot of people swiftly heralded it as a 100% win. But reading is fundamental, people. Whenever you see something, make sure you read in its entirety. It is a win on one front, but a loss, even greater loss on another. And I'm kind of going to get into that. And we're going to talk about looking at the world when we're talking about the scope of the Eighth Amendment from a constitutional point of view. Mike Steele, who calls in often, states that the problem is that we have a Supreme Court. We give more power to it in our minds, in our society. We give more power to the Supreme Court, which has no power greater than the Constitution. We give more power to judges, which is not greater than the power of the Constitution. We give more power to quote unquote case law, which is not greater than the Constitution. The Constitution is that sword, as well as that chain with a ball at the end that binds tyrannical government, overextending its power and legitimately targeting you and infringing upon your individual liberty that was granted to you long before you existed. So here we are in the 21st century, still having to have conversations about what the Constitution meant, or instead of what it stated. You know, I talked about it on yesterday a little bit, and I got to bring it back over to today. The Constitution says what it says. And when my father would give me instruction, The thing that he would say often is, do not interpret my instruction. Do not change what I said. Do not revamp it, because if you're doing that, the only reason you're looking to do that is to be disobedient. And to do anything other, find a way to do anything other than what I told you to do. And so we have to look at it this way, that when the founding fathers started this country and made it into a country free of the crown, that hopefully the intent of the good men, the parts of the good men who did this work, who spent their life trying to write this Constitution, ratify it, and make it relevant not only to their time, but really peer into the future and kind of see what possibly could happen, what they had already experienced, and understand that the Constitution is really just something that is expounded upon in our own way from experience of dealing with Great Britain, of dealing with England. So we had already seen the type of situation that we had in Great Britain, and we wanted to ensure that our government did not mirror anything like what we had already been through. And so the intent was to look into the future and to always ensure that your right, no matter what it was never infringed upon. And so it is really pitiful that we are in a modern era and we still have to have conversations about, well, what does the Constitution really mean? It meant what it said. And it should not be left up to men. And it's not, interpretation is opinion. Let me say that again. Interpretation is opinion. There is what is written, and then there is how people interpret it in their own way, but that does not change what is already said. So what does the Eighth Amendment say? It says excessive bail. Okay. Oh, Lord, we're already getting into it. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Excessive bail. Well, I'd say that's probably about the majority of bail. The majority of bail is excessive. And then if we really look at our country from an honest point of view, we know that the cash bail system is a for-profit business. We know that cash bail is used for, as people would say, it's used for the purposes of ensuring that people will show up for court. Let me just go ahead and state, financial responsibility does not ensure that people will come to court. It's the fact that they just don't want to go to jail. They don't want to have a warrant out for their arrest. People, 9 times out of 10, people are going to show up, except those hardcore criminals who know it's so much things. You know, they've murdered people, scattered their body, dumped their body. They've done things like that. They have a reason to run because they know that the bail that's going to be like $1 million for them to get out because they've murdered 10 people, that's not excessive for the crime that was done. Now, that's one of the things that we have to look at, excessive bail. What were they talking about? That the bail that is set has to match the crime that the person committed. And so in an instance, I don't know if you, the listener, has ever heard of Kalief Browder. Looking at Kalief Browder, and again, if you want to call and talk to me, it's 800-8949. So when we look at a young man like Kalief Browder, who got arrested at 16 years of age. He was 16 years old from the Bronx. And when we see Kalief Browder, he's supposedly him and some other young black men robbed a store and supposedly took a backpack with a camera, $700, a credit card, and an iPod Touch. From a Mexican immigrant. Now, the person who stated that originally that pointed out Kalief and said that he did it. Originally, this person stated that it was done that day. Then he stated it was done 2 weeks prior. He couldn't get his story straight, but they still arrested him. And as a matter of fact, they stopped and they frisked him. Oh boy. So this is why when I talked to you guys, I think it was the first Know Your Rights Friday that I did. When I talked about your Miranda rights, that you do have a right to reject anyone to seize you and to search you. You have a right to ask, am I being detained? Am I under arrest? Now, Mike, who called in before, says, in reality, you're under arrest the moment that your freedom of movement has been impeded upon. The moment that you are stopped, you legitimately are under arrest. But the problem that we have is we don't know our rights, so we cannot assert them. And that's why I encourage you, the listener, to really hear me and the work that I'm trying to do on your behalf, because this is really kind of how all of this started in the first place. If poor Khalif knew that, number one, he didn't have to answer any questions. Number two, he had a right to ask why he was being stopped. Had he committed a crime? What was the evidence against him? He had a right to ask for a lawyer. He had a right to reject a search. He had those rights. He had those constitutional rights, but he didn't know them, as probably 99% of us don't know our constitutional rights. And so he allowed them to stop and frisk him. And even though there was no evidence, they still took him down to the 48th precinct. And so they kept him. And even though the guy couldn't get his story straight, he said Khalif did it. Then he said he didn't do it. They should have just cut the kid loose, right? But this is one of the reasons why bail, in my opinion, needs to be done away with completely and totally. Because we understand, or we should be able to admit, and I'm going to continue to talk about it, we got to admit that the bail system is targeting, in particular, people of color, and secondly, people who are poor. And that the majority of people who are locked up in prison, it's like 60-something% of people who are locked up in our prisons all across America have not even been convicted. Do you believe that that is constitutional? And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to get into why in just a moment. Because the beautiful thing about the Constitution is that there's always another amendment that backs up another amendment. And that's the beauty of the work that was done by our founding fathers, was that they didn't just, this is why nothing has been left up to interpretation, because they backed up one amendment by tying it to another amendment that was a lot more specific. So this particular one, you know, you look at the 8th Amendment and you say, well, that's kind of open. You know, that's kind of broad. People use that term all the time. That's kind of broad. The 8th Amendment is kind of broad. It just says excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted, right? But then you take a look at our good old 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person. That's really the meat of it right there. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. Now, that's due process. Due process. Life, liberty, or property. The moment that you're stopped, there goes your liberty. That's why I can agree with Mike when he says that the moment you are stopped, you're under arrest. It is true, because the moment that you are stopped, there goes your liberty, your freedom of moving about in this republic as a citizen. So going back to Khalif gets in prison. They interrogate him. He continues to state that he did not do anything. They did not have any evidence. This is the interesting thing about our criminal justice system. They didn't have any evidence against him. He didn't do anything. He continued to state this. But after interrogating him, they charged him with robbery, grand larceny, and assault. Now, this is another thing that continues to happen, and David Toulis has talked about it on this show, which is one of the reasons why when we have a conversation, a lot of this stuff is just compacted. It's in layers. It's one issue, and then it's another issue on top of it. And so that's why I say in my opening statement, we can't leave out the Crooked Police Department. That's not all police, but it's a lot of police. And we can't lie about what's going on within our Chattanooga Police Department. We can't turn the blinders on. And my thing is, if all the things that continue to come out or that have come out are just the things that we know, you have to ask yourself, what is it that's happening within our Chattanooga Police Department that we don't know, that we have yet to find out about? How did this young man get charged with assault when the only thing he supposedly did originally, even though there was no evidence to support this, and the person who supposedly stated that he stole from him would later say that he didn't do it? So he couldn't even get his story straight. How did this person end up getting charged with assault? Now, he was already on probation, so they arraigned him and they charged him with second-degree robbery, and his bail was set at $3,000. Now, somebody out there would hear $3,000. That's not a lot of money. Well, you know what? When you're poor, $900, which is for some people, that's rent times 2, or that's all your bills for the month if you're poor. And a lot of us, we need to stop fronting, because if these creditors, even some of them, I know I got some listeners out there, you got a nice car, you got a nice house, and you swimming in debt. Stop it. You're going to have to pull out your credit card for the $900, because the truth is, you don't really have it either. Let's be real. I know it's tight. As my uncle would say, I know it's tight, but it's right. A lot of us are broke. And some of us who are pretending to not be broke, we broke too. $900 is a lot of money to put up for bail. And then there's people out there, $3,000. Shucks. I've known people who've had to put up $2,000 and $3,000 for the bail. First time getting in trouble, depending on what it is. And especially if they're African-American and a male. Oh, yeah. It's not uncommon. The reality is that the bail is supposed to match the crime that was committed. And when we see bail, one of the things that should be taken into account, because the magistrate asks you a lot of questions. Where do you work? Such and such and such and such. So they know that you're poor before they set the bail. So if they already knew that this young man came from the Bronx, they probably knew if he didn't have a job, he's 16 years old, he doesn't have a job. They don't have the money. And so he goes to jail. They send him to Rikers Island. And there he would spend 3 years. Let me say that again. Khalif, who supposedly stole an iPod and a backpack and a credit card that was not confirmed, that did not have any evidence. And even though his constitutional right says that he has a right to due process, which was infringed upon, his bail was excessive, considering that there was no evidence, considering that he had no due process. Come on. Considering that they had already frisked him, I'm sure they had stopped and frisked him. They had impeded his walking and frisked him, I'm sure, against his will. Come on. 3 years for stealing a backpack. Would you say that that's fair? 3 years? And the only reason he couldn't go home is because he's too poor. He's too poor for if he stole the backpack, if he was guilty. 3 years? 3 years for stealing a backpack? Come on. Come on. We're going to continue to talk about it on the second half of the first segment. Cash bail, the 8th Amendment. Why we need to have a constitutional look at our criminal justice system. And folks, it's Know Your Rights Fridays. I'm talking about it on the Marie Mott Show. Y'all stay tuned for the second half of the first segment.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
The Tennessee Department of Health urging residents to take preventative steps against mosquitoes carrying West Nile virus after 2 recent deaths in the state. Authorities say mosquito-borne viruses have so far killed 2 people and made 6 others ill in Georgia. Some precautions against mosquitoes include staying inside at dusk and dawn, wearing long, loose-fitting clothing, and using insect repellent. Chattanooga police have identified Larry Gene Maddox as the suspect who robbed the First American Bank on Brainerd Road Wednesday. The holdup happened just before 1 p.m. Maddox confessed to the robbery and is charged with robbery. And no lane closures for the Labor Day holiday, according to TDOT. Construction crews will stop all lane closure activity beginning at noon today through 6 a.m. Tuesday. But be aware workers may still be working in many of the construction zones. The Sean Hannity Show heard weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 exclusively on Nooga Radio. Val St. John for Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News Now.
Let's face it, Old Faithful isn't as faithful as it used to be. Constant repairs are a hassle and can rack up quick in money and time. Landers McClarty Ford can fix that. Right now, you can get a 2016 Ford Focus, 34,000 miles, only $11,491. A 2017 Chevy Spark with only 17,000 miles for less than $12,000. A 2015 Volkswagen Jetta with less than 21,000 miles for $11,991. Yeah, browse their entire inventory of new and new-to-you cars, trucks, and SUVs online at Landers McClarty Ford at FortPayne.com. Landers McClarty Ford of Fort Payne. If you can't find your next perfect ride, they'll go find it for you. Big city selection, small town prices, friendly service, and top dollar for your trade. The savings are waiting and only a short drive away, so what are you waiting for? Get started with your personalized shopping today at Landers McClarty Ford of FortPayne.com.
Nooga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Hello? Who am I speaking with? Eric, you're our winner. Really?
You'll receive tickets for all 3 races between the Camping World Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Monster Energy Cup races.
Holy cow.
In addition, you'll receive a 2-night stay at the Microtel Hotel and restaurant accommodations at 2 area restaurants.
Nooga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Nooga Radio.
92.7.
Your NASCAR racing station. Nooga Radio 92.7 FM.
Nooga Radio
92.7.
Join Nooga Radio and the Gridiron Gang live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks at 10 North on the North Shore. We're talking all things high school football. There's a specialty brew or refresher weekly inspired by the game of the week. Sweet treats, extended hours all season long, and we're pet friendly. Portions of all proceeds support local schools and educational scholarships as well as after-school programs. It's football time in Tennessee. Join us every Thursday live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks, 10 North, your North Shore neighborhood living room.
Your home is a constant work in progress. Repaint the walls? Yeah, easy enough. Leaky faucet? There's a video for that. But roof repair? You might want some help. That's where Chattanooga Roofing Contractors come in. They have 3 generations of roofing excellence you can count on. Leave the ladder in the garage. Go to chatroofing.com. That's chatroofing.com for Chattanooga Roofing Contractors, a roofing company you can trust.
Now, Rick wants you to buy on U.S. Gold American coins. Are you tired of making 1% on your investments with the banks? Even 2 or 3% at best? Now, Rick wants you to buy on U.S. Gold American coins.
Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds, Brainerd Road.
Man, you sure you know what you're doing?
Yeah, I worked with my dad on his truck all the time. Just one more
bolt to go.
Yeah, wrong bolt. Today's truck ain't your daddy's truck. For repairs on today's vehicles, you need AMCO Transmission and Total Car Care of Chattanooga on Lee Highway. Stay on the road, not in the garage. AMCO Transmission on Lee Highway. Get it done the right way. The Thompson Pet way. Yeah, I just put that anywhere.
Join We've Got You Covered with Scott Schrader every Saturday from 10 to 11 on Nooga Radio. From finance to fixtures, we discuss everything you need to know about buying or owning a home, the pitfalls, the perks, and everything in between. Saturday mornings, 10 to 11, right here on Nooga Radio.
Nooga Radio, Chattanooga weather.
Areas of patchy dense fog will start out your Friday. Very warm and humid for the afternoon highs. Upper 80s with a few isolated showers and storms. Tonight, any showers and storms diminishing, lows near 70. For the holiday weekend, only isolated afternoon showers and storms heating up, highs of around 90 by Labor Day. Looking to buy or sell a home? Real Living Southern Realty provides real answers and customized marketing solutions. Serving the entire tri-state area, check rosouthernrealty.com for more. And I'm Sourcine 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Hoare.
Nooga Radio 92.7.
Oh, it's Know Your Rights Fridays here in the Marine Mott Show. And we're talking about it, you guys. We're talking about understanding and asserting your constitutional rights. We're specifically looking at the 8th Amendment. Why? Because we had what people are calling a win of the end of cash bail in the state of California. And I wanted to do an honest assessment, tying it back to constitutional law and what the Constitution says. And have people really understand, because a lot of people don't read. They just see a headline and may read the first paragraph, but may not read an article in depth to understand what it means. And whenever you see a change in legislation, you better read the entirety of what's happening so you can understand how that affects the people. And when we look at the end of cash bail in California, which I'm not going to step on it too much because it is a step in the right direction, but unfortunately it was, in my opinion, a trade-off, because to end cash bail, but to have it be a situation where the governor still caved on a portion because they just wanted cash bail to be completely done away with. Unfortunately, what happened is cash bail was done away with, but one of the things that they put in there was that they were going to have risk assessments and preventative detention, which was just a new way of looking at how to lock people up. Now, so the whole reason of doing away with, let's just be basic in it. The whole reason of doing away with cash bail is to ensure that people who are disproportionately locked up don't continue to be locked up. So having it being risk factors, or basically it's just a new way of seeing who deserves to still remain in prison. That's the importance of us understanding that when we ask for stuff as the people, we cannot make a trade. We can't make any trades. We have to ask for what we want and what we expect outright, because basically what they have done is traded one predatory system for another. Now they've ended cash bail because we have to understand, and we have to look at our judiciary system from the very beginning. 90-something% of our district attorneys are white. Yes. The overwhelming amount of our judges are white. The overwhelming amount of our magistrates are white. Okay? So we're dealing with the system. We're dealing with a system that is often dominated by white males. It's not even dominated by white women. It's dominated by white men at every level. And so if we gonna be honest and if we gonna be real, we have to be real, because I've talked about it before this week. When we look at race and we look at the benefits of race, which is racism, which is skin privilege, which even for my white brothers and sisters, they don't even understand that the whole purposes of skin privilege is it's not really even a benefit to them. Because, and I'm going to talk about it on the second part of the show, starting at noon. That when you look at the rights that were given to poor whites after Bacon's Rebellion, and again, I encourage you guys, you got Google, you got a smartphone, go back and look this stuff up. If you missed the show earlier this week, shame on you. It's recorded. Go to the Nougat Radio 92.7 website and pull the show back up. But after Bacon's Rebellion, because it was white indentured servants and black indentured servants that worked together that not only captured Jamestown in Virginia, but darn near burned it to the ground. Excuse me. I almost slipped. Almost burned it to the ground. That was solidarity, because we both recognized that as poor folk, we were in the same boat. We were in the same boat. And the only way we could fight the system and the powers that be was to work together. And so this distrust that was placed between poor whites and poor blacks, who really were all in the same ship. We're in the same ship together. The distrust was put between us from rich white people who only benefited from your ignorance, to my white brothers and sisters, your ignorance of this system, and understanding that the privilege you receive from this system is really your responsibility to dismantle. It's not black people or people of color's responsibility to dismantle this system. It's your responsibility, because other white people they've never listened to us in like 500 years. We've been talking about civil rights for like 200 something plus years. So we're never going to be in a position in America, in a white dominated, in a white racist supremacist system. We're never going to be at the advantage. So if you call yourself a human, if you call yourself, secondly, a Christian, or if you just call yourself a neighbor, a friend, a believer of the people, your skin, if it happens to be white, gives you a benefit that is not extended to others. And certainly if you're a white male, you have a double privilege. You have a double privilege in this society. And you have even a greater responsibility than your lady does. You have a greater responsibility. Let me say that again. You, as a white male, to my white male listener, you have a privilege, a double privilege. And don't forget, please don't forget that, because that's historical. You can go back and you can look at the women's suffragette movement. Your women were asking for the right to vote. And it was a lot of black people that helped them, especially black women, that helped them achieve that goal. And so even you have a double privilege in this society that has been extended to you for a very, very long time. But understand, the only reason why poor white people, because there's really not any middle class people hardly at all, white, black, a Mexican, our middle class is almost just evaporated. So it's just the poor folks and the rich folks. That's just about all it is. That the only reason you were given a little bit more crumbs and a skin privilege in this society in the first place is to distract you from the necessary thing that you need to do, which is come together with other poor people and turn this system on its head. Yeah. That's going to be a tough pill for some people to swallow. But the reason I continue to talk about we have to contextualize things, we have to be honest, because I'm not in the business of lying. I'm not interested in lying. As Miss Constance Giles said, she never believed that she would end up in handcuffs calling the police for help. And here she is having a fight against the sheriff's office for her freedom. And she's a white woman. I never would have thought at 30 years old that I would see a poor sister in Saudi Daisy who's terrified of her police department as well, which that says a lot. If in Saudi Daisy, where it's not a whole lot of black people or Mexican people or just people of color in general, if in Saudi Daisy we have white people that are terrified of their police too, that is a problem. And for this woman to just take off from the police says a whole lot. I never would have thought that a white woman in Saudi Daisy would be shot and killed through her windshield from a police officer, not her crazy husband trying to chase after her, but from a police officer. We got to look at this system. And one of the reasons why we have to talk about this and understand that it is based on race is because once they have swept as many of us as they can into this system and it's no more of us left, like it's like the Native American just disappeared for the most part from our thoughts and our daily process. Why? Because unless we see them trying to fight pipelines going into their sovereign areas, we don't even think about the Native American whose country that was stolen from them. But I digress. We certainly have to admit that once we are gone, once they've locked up as much of us as they possibly could, who is going to feed the beast? Pause. Who's going to feed the beast? It's going to be you. It's going to be you. Your children. They're already doing it. It's plenty of poor white people who are in jail. They're already doing it. They're already shooting at you. They're already locking you up. Now, they're not doing it on the scale as they do with people of color, but they're already doing it. Our problems are the same. If we focus on everything that brings us together, which should be love, should be acceptance, the fact that we're Americans, okay? And that the Constitution has granted us all the same equal rights and protection under the Constitution as a foundation for our civil liberties, then we have more in common than we really have apart. And that's real. But trading cash bail for risk assessments and detention, we have to understand that if we don't have enough representation in the form of women and people of color in our judiciary system, we have to then admit that the end of cash bail for the trade of risk assessments and so-called preventative detention is really probably not going to shift the meter too much. And eventually we're just going to collapse into another system that we're going to spend another several decades trying to fight. If we're going, so let me come down a little bit. We're talking about the Eighth Amendment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments. It's cruel and unusual. It says cruel and unusual, not cruel or, cruel and unusual. It is both cruel. It's cruel to lock up people who are poor because they don't have a right to pay. They don't have the means to pay. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Talk to me.
I have to agree with you 100%. The local jurist is more important than the Supreme Court justice because they determine whether you go free or you're stuck behind a ridiculous amount of bail. Remember, the Constitution speaks of no unreasonable amount because you're supposed to prepare your own defense. In this country, innocent until proven guilty, and I'd rather see 99 guilty people go free than one guilty person go to jail. That used to be the mantra, that we'd rather see guilty people go free than one innocent person go to jail. You can't prepare your defense if you're in jail. And obviously, if you're poor, you're at a disadvantage. It's ridiculous that the multimillionaire gets the same fine as the poor person. I never was able to figure that out. And on top of that, Marie, you're right. It's about poverty. There's a museum of crime in Pigeon Forge. And when you visit that museum of crime, how many percentage-wise of the people that they represent do you think are white or black? Give me a number.
Oh, man. 10?
They're all white. They're all white. The Museum of Crime, most of the criminals are white because they were white up until 30 years ago. All white criminals in there, from Al Capone all down to the street dog. Because if you were black back then and you committed a crime, you'd be lucky if you made it to the police station without getting a bullet in your head.
Or being strung up in a tree.
Yeah, exactly. But as whites started to develop an economy and pulled out of it and became richer, not in Appalachia where The poorest whites in Appalachia are poorer than they are in the poorest third world countries. But in average America, when this started to happen, the trend started to reverse because, as you said, if it's a choice between eating or not eating, between feeding your kids and not feeding your kids, you know, who's not going to step out and do what they have to do? And I'm not talking about these criminal thugs that are in gangs that just kill each other for revenge. You know, that's a whole different type of crime that, you know, I grew up white, as you know, in Philadelphia, and I belonged to a gang as a white guy, but our gang included, because if you didn't, people don't understand this, if you didn't, we weren't protected.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't protected when we went to school. There were whites and blacks and Italians and Jews and Irish in our gang because our gang was territory. It didn't have anything to do with color, race, or religion. It had to do with territory. And if you weren't with your peeps, you'd get beaten up or stabbed. A buddy of mine got stabbed just walking down the street. They put an ice pick in his side, walking with me. So people have to understand the reality of what's going on, and thank you for bringing it to light. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. That's Mike Steele, Mr. Constitution himself. One of the other things that ties into this, and this is why the whole judicial system for all of what it is, the fact that, first of all, it's based on monetary gain is unconstitutional. Because it's cruel and unusual to hold people because they're poor, to basically lock people up because they haven't been proven guilty yet. If over 50%, because it's like 67 or it's 60 something percent of the people who are locked up in our jails have not been convicted, you best believe that the intent is to, as Mike Steele said, to make sure that the only choice that they have, because they've been locked up, they've been kept from their family for God knows how long, right? The only thing that they want to do is go home. They're willing to go home so bad, they'll just cop a plea. And understand for the lawyers, because everybody's in on it. That's why I say that it's no way when we make trades, it's going to work. We can't make trades. If we're going to do it, we got to go all the way. And for me, all the way is just ending the jail system as it is pretty much altogether. Altogether. People need to pay people back. Well, first of all, we need to ensure that people's civil liberties have not been infringed upon in the absolute very first place. Because the last time I checked, the Sixth Amendment says, it says that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right. Now, we have to look at the language, what it says. I need you, the listener, to look at the language, because what is said is so important. They didn't write it like how they would. And it's totally interpreted different from how it is written. It says that the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, with district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witness against him or her, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. This is the whole point. When Mike was talking, he was talking about the Sixth Amendment. You can't get your stuff together to defend yourself if you're locked up in prison. And then in Khalif's case, when he was locked up over a doggone backpack, my friends, he was locked up and often beaten and kept in solitary confinement. How you going to get mail in solitary? How are you going to put together a legal defense if you're kept in solitary? Meaning that you're in a solitary confinement probably for several hours in a day, meaning you have no access to books, no access to phone, no access to written letter. Come on. Come on, y'all. That's why I said we can't leave up any of the Constitution to interpretation, because people won't tell us exactly what it says, that you shall enjoy the right to a speedy. So when you have to wait a year, 2 years for your trial to even happen, Is that speedy to you? Is that speedy? Is Speedy Khalif having to wait in jail for 3 years before he finally has the charges dropped? And the poor boy has been beaten and put in solitary confinement for so long. He's so messed up in a mental state. He goes home and hangs himself. Hangs himself. Commits suicide. Come on. They took this young man out of school and kept him until he was an adult over a backpack because he was too poor to pay the bail. And trading off the bail for risk assessments that are often and probably going to come from other white men who do not often understand or even agree with how we live our life in the inner city. And understanding that when white people talk about crime, first of all, they talk about it from a white privilege standpoint because it's drugs in the white community just like it is in the black. It's just not sensationalized on media and on television like it is for people of color. But y'all got problems too. Ours was crack. Yours is heroin. There's no difference in human beings. We're all people with problems. And we benefit more in agreeing that we all have been given the same rights, not only by God, but by the Constitution, and figuring out of how we need to stand in solidarity to end systems like cash bail indefinitely. And taking a deeper look at how we have allowed even our penal system to
WPLZ HD4 Ottawa, W224AZ Chattanooga.
Serving Chattanooga.
Broadcasting live from the center of the universe, the Tennessee Valley's most listened to news talk station.
Chattanooga Radio 92.7.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Quicken Loans.
I'm Steve Kaif, an official